This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Agitavach. Let me share with you a novel interpretation of the Gemara Masechta Zvachim. The Gemara tells us, Bikesh Moshe Malchus v'lo nitna lo. Moshe requested Melucha, kingship, and it was not given to him. Where was it refused to Moshe? In this week's Parsha, Parsha Shemos. Shenemer al tikrav haloim. Do not approach haloim. Do not approach here. The in haloim ella malchus. Haloim refers to malchus, as David HaMelech says, "Who am I that you brought me ad haloim?" Let's try to explain. Why was Moshe refused malchus? Why is malchus something which is not fitting to Moshe? After all, Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest human being who ever lived. If anyone was roy for Melucha, it should have been Moshe Rabbeinu. And perhaps we could explain as follows. The Torah tells us about the Melech Mitzrayim. Vayamos Melech Mitzrayim. The Melech Mitzrayim died. Vayeyonachu b'nei Yisrael minu avoda vayizaku. This week's Parsha, Parak Beis, Pasuk Chav Gimel. Says the Medrash Rabbah, Parsha Aleph, Ois Lamed Daled, that in fact the Melech Mitzrayim did not die, but Shenetztara. He was a leper. V'haya shoichet tinokas Yisrael v'roichetz bedamam. He would shech Jewish children and wash in their blood. And a Metzora is considered as if they are dead, like it says, Al Tihi Kames, by a Metzora. So therefore, the Medrash tells us that the Melech Mitzrayim did not die, but instead he had tsaras. But the question is, how does the Medrash know that? Maybe really the Melech Mitzrayim died in actuality. How do Chazal see that it was only a form of tsaras? And it is said over the name of the Vilna Gaon that the way Chazal know that the Melech Mitzrayim only had tsaras and did not actually die is because it says Vayamas Melech Mitzrayim. And the word Melech is not used in correlation in connection with death. As the Medrash says in Koheles, Parsha Ches Oisir Aleph, Amar Rab Levi, 52 times, close to 52 times, it says Vehamelech David. As soon as David was about to die, Vayikrevu Yemei David Lamos. Why? She'ein Shultain B'yom Hamaves. Meaning, when it comes to Misa, the concept of Melucha is not possible. Therefore, if it says Vayamos Melech Mitzrayim, it had to have been a pseudo Melucha. It had to be a pseudo death, not a real death, because Ein Shultain B'yom Hamaves. In relation to death, we don't use the term Melucha. And therefore, Chazal say the same thing on Bishnas Mois HaMelech Uzziah, that he became a Metzora. So, based on this graph, that the concept of Melucha is not possible b'yom hamaves, perhaps we could explain as follows. The Gemara says in Brachas on Daf Yud, David lived in 5 worlds and he sang Shira in all of them. And the 5th world, he looked at the Yom HaMisa and he said Shira. Shenemar, Baruchi nafshi es Hashem, Hashem Elokai, Godalta Ma'oid, Hoid V'Hadar Lavashta. How do we know that refers to the Yom HaMisa? Says the Gemara, from Meiseifa de Inyana, it says, Taster Panecha Yiba Helun, Toisef Rucham Yigvaon. Explains the Pnei Yeshua that when the Gemara says David HaMelech sang Shira in 5 worlds, the 5 worlds means with the 5 chalakim of his neshama. What are the 5 chalkei hanefesh? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Naran, that's 3, Chaya, and Yechida. And on the Yom HaMisa, the 5th level, the highest dimension of the neshama is revealed. That dimension is Yechida. This is what it means. Toisef Rucham, your added Ruach at the time of Yigvaon. It says Toisef Rucham Yigvaon. Literally, he gathers in the soul when a person expires. But it could also mean, says the Pnei Yeshua, Toisef Rucham, Hashem adds Ruach, namely Yechida Yigvaon at the time of death. Let's explain. What is Misa? The Rambam writes in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah, Misa is when the Tzura is separated from the Chomer. A body is a composite of Tzura and Chomer. Chomer is a physical substance, and Tzura is the purpose of the body, the faculty of speech and intellect. And when a person passes on, the Tzura separates from the Chomer, and the person becomes Tzura Nivdelas. Now, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, Yosef Engel writes that Moshe Rabbeinu, even b'chayav, even when he was alive, his tzura was a tzura nevdelas, meaning his entire entity, his entire chomer, was already transformed into tzura. He was tzura levad. And this is what the Mar Nevuchim writes explicitly in Chelak Aleph, Perek Lamed Zayin, that Moshe Rabbeinu was tzura levad. He had completely elevated and transformed his chomer's physical substance into tzura. Moshe Rabbeinu, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, b'chayav was like an Adam b'shas misa. Therefore, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, Moshe Rabbeinu had yechida tamed. He always had the highest level of neshama. Therefore, explains Rabbi Yosef Engel, Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time speaking because he b'chayav was like a different tzaddik la'achar misa. And there's a psikta Rav Kahana and a Yerushalmi in Avodah Zarah that says the only difference between tzaddikim while they're alive and tzaddikim la'achar misasam is the faculty of speech. This then is what the Gemara in Brachos means on Vav Amud Beis, Agra de Beit Tamya Shtikusa. The schar of the Beit Tamya, the schar of the Avelos is silence, because this is the shvach for the niftar. And meaning to demonstrate that this individual was such a tzaddik that all he's missing now is dibur, and therefore we are quiet during the Avelos as a token that this is all the tzaddik was missing. Therefore, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, Moshe Rabbeinu alive was like a tzaddik la'achar haptira, because he was already a tzura nevdalas. Perhaps then we could explain that if Moshe Rabbeinu b'chayav already had the madrega of yichida, he was on the madrega of toisef rucham yigvaon, that he was at the level of, at the time of Gviyah, he had an additional neshama. He was always b'yayim hamisa, so to speak. Then perhaps we could explain that is why melucha was not possible for Moshe Rabbeinu, as the pasuk says, "Ein shilton b'yayim hamaves." And Rabbi Yosef Engel has illuminated us that Moshe Rabbeinu was on the madrega of Yom Hamisa Kol Chayav. That is why he had difficulty speaking, and that is why he was always zoicha to the level of Yechida. Melucha was not shaykh to Moshe mipnei gadlusa, because of his greatness. He was above the possibility for Melucha, and for Moshe Rabbeinu, Melucha was not possible because ein shiltain b'yayim hamaves. Agitavach, agazintavach, amazel dekavach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.